Capital One.
Going into the year 2, we understand a lot of those things necessary to be competitive and win games. Now it's how do you do it week in and week out.
As the Tigers travel to Starkville to face Mississippi State in the SEC opener.
Touchdown, Mighty Tigers!
Coach Kelly is coming up, but first, from inside the Capital One studio on the campus of LSU, here are your hosts, former Tiger Gordy Rush and the voice of your Fighting Tigers, Chris Blair.
Welcome in, everybody, on a Monday, not quite afternoon, still Monday morning. We get ready for the SEC opener coming up this week for your Fighting Tigers. They happen to start on the road. A little early meeting this season with Mississippi State coming up in Starkville. Coming up at 12 noon today, we'll go to the Lawton Room as Coach Brian Kelly will address the media, talk about the game this past Saturday with the Tigers had in hand, and then talk about what the team's going to prepare for this week in that SEC opener against Mississippi State, who will come into the matchup 2-0. As always, Gordy Rush joining me, and Gordy, we'll talk about Mississippi State and how interesting they are here in, again, the first year for Zach Arnett. But first, let's talk about Saturday. I mean, again, it was you go into the matchup. We talked about it on Tuesday. On paper, it's a game LSU should win. But as Coach Kelly said during the press conference and said all week during his media stops, there are things we're looking at for LSU in particular. Your thoughts down there on the sideline in that 72-10 win for LSU?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, I thought he accomplished a lot of things that he wanted to. And first off, he told me before the game, I should say, that tonight was all about playing the game the right way. And there were too many times in the second half of that opener against Florida State where the team wasn't playing at full speed. Maybe they weren't running to the football, or they weren't executing at the level they should be in a football game. It looked a little bit like practice. He said, "This isn't practice. We had plenty of practice. We want to come out and play 4 quarters at that speed." And then I think the second thing was just correcting and making adjustments personnel-wise to some of the places that they had some question marks. We saw a number of personnel changes. I thought those players played well. And so you got to accomplish what you wanted to against Grambling, a game that you were supposed to win. And now you get ready for this this SEC stretch. So you've got 3 of the next 4 on the road in the SEC.
Yeah, and, one of the things that we wanted to touch on today, and we kind of touched on it last week, Gordy, and that was, again, following the opening season loss a year ago, it's not as if Coach Kelly and this coaching staff are not willing to make some changes, whether it's schematically or from a personnel standpoint. And we all saw those very early on in the game on Saturday in both of those categories. Let's first start with the offensive line. We saw some adjustment there. Again, not a huge surprise, something he talked about, but it was good to actually see it. What did you see? What did you make of just a little tweak up front?
Well, I think the big thing that they had to get more physical on the offensive line. And so Lance Hurd, the offensive tackle, came in on the second series, and they basically did a platoon, an A-B platoon. So Frazier started the game at right guard, and outside of him was Emory Jones at right tackle. And the next series, Jones kicked down to guard, Frazier came out, and it was Hurd that came in at right tackle. You get a lot bigger when Hurd gets on the football field. So I think that was one part of it. And then the addition of Logan Diggs. So there were a lot of questions about Logan Diggs. He warmed up at Florida State, and both he and Coach Wilson didn't feel like he was at 100%, hadn't had enough practice, and so he sat in that game. He did not play in that football game. And you and I talked about during the broadcast, Diggs has a little bit different gear. I love the way he slides and finds the hole. And in a crowded backfield, I think everybody was wondering whether or not there was going to somebody emerge as being the feature back. I think we found out that answer is it is Logan Diggs.
Yeah, and, Coach Kelly, talking to him last Thursday on his weekly radio show, I mentioned, in the opening game, Jaden Daniels, again, the leading rusher. Now, as it turned out, a year ago, Jaden was also the leading rusher overall, and he was quick to point out that's not the recipe for success for LSU. And so congratulations to Logan Diggs, first 100-yard rusher on the season as far as the running back room is concerned. 115 yards, had the rushing touchdown. Want to go back to the secondary a little bit because we saw some personnel changes there. You were right there. Again, we've talked about it before where you place yourself on the sideline is so you can see basically from a DB's perspective how the game is going. What did you see as far as personnel changes, and what did you see schematically in week 2 that maybe we didn't see in week 1?
Yeah, let's start in the secondary where Denver Harris got the start at cornerback and didn't see a whole lot of him in the scrimmages and knew that he was a tremendous talent, a 5-star talent. Of course, the story coming from Texas A&M and came over here to LSU. Tremendous upside. Started at corner. I thought he did really well in a lot of man-to-man situations. Gave up an early touchdown, which is just, I think, feeling his way through and finding his timing and his ability to go find that football when he's in man coverage. And that only happens when you get on the big stage. And that's why you play games like Grambling to get that sort of experience. But I thought Harris played well. And then the third corner was Ashton Stamps from Rummel High School, a true freshman, tremendous upside as well. He is long, he can run. And he came in and spelled Alexander a little bit. So I think those are the 3 corners that they're going to go forward with. And so you have a second-year player, a sophomore in Harris, and a true freshman in Stamps. So the Tigers are going to be young. But again, both these guys have a lot of potential.
One of the subjects last week that was discussed during the press conference, I imagine it'll be brought up again today, Gordy, and that is Harold Perkins Jr. We saw a little change in the way they set up the linebackers. We saw Harold again, play more to the outside, more to his strengths, what we know he can do. And I argued at the end of the radio broadcast that he came away with 1 tackle, which, by the way, was a spectacular open field tackle. But to think he didn't impact the game is not the true story because he got after the quarterback. They were able to get rid of the football on a couple of occasions, but they knew he was there.
Numerous hurries, and as you mentioned, you've got to scheme for him. And I think that's what makes him so difficult. This was the adjustment that LSU made defensively. They put Harold Perkins back at the nickel back position. That's where he played last year, and they pulled Greg Brooks off the football field for the most part, except for a couple sub packages. And they put Greg Penn in at that weak side linebacker that Perkins started the season off against Florida State. What I like about that, Chris, I think that Greg Penn is one of your best 11 football players. He needs to be on the field. And secondly, Perkins looks so much more comfortable in space out there. He's able to come off the edge and rush and do the things that Harold Perkins does. And I think all of this training that they spent spring, summer, and fall about being better in pass coverage. You could tell he was much better in pass coverage than he was in the middle of the year. So I think that's where we'll see Harold Perkins going forward. And look, I understand what they were trying to get done and get him inside. It just looks more natural out there at the nickelback.
I want to give Jaden Daniels some credit, not just for his numbers, because we touched on it last week as well. The numbers against Florida State, if you just pull those out, extrapolate them, okay, yeah, he had good numbers. I mean, he ran the ball and he threw the ball. He was the first to say during the media session last week, there's a lot of things I can do better. And, a couple of things he pointed to, Gordy, was, trusting the receivers, put the ball down the field, let them go make plays. He had 5 touchdown passes in the first half. That's a career high for Jaden Daniels. Joe Burrow did that against Georgia Southern. He eventually threw 7 against Oklahoma, but still not a bad day at the office if you're Jaden Daniels. But I like the targets that were used. We saw Brian Thomas again emerge. He had 6 catches in the game. Chris Hilton had the big touchdown pass. He had 2 catches, 53 yards. Neighbors, of course, Anderson. Lacey got a score. I mean, he was utilizing the weapons. And again, I think that's a big confidence boost for Jaden Daniels. And he did what he said he wanted to do in week 2.
Yeah, I thought he was more decisive, especially going through his progressions. There were some missed decisions in the first half against Florida State. You didn't see that against Grambling. And then secondly, I think the addition of the running game with Logan Diggs, what it did, it opened up, the middle of the football field because of the play action and having Diggs back there. The middle of the field was open and there were a bunch of strikes they were able to take advantage of in the center of the field where they primarily worked outside the hashes against Florida State. And then the second part is, I think the fact that you had a running game, and I know it was a difference in competition, but you had more time to throw the football. I thought they did a much better job of stretching the football field and attacking vertically. That's something that they did in spring football, they did in fall camp, and they wanted to make a commitment to stretching the field. LSU has tremendous athletes at wide receiver. They've got to be able to take advantage of them.
We're about 10 minutes away from Coach Brian Kelly joining us inside the Lawton Room to talk about his observations of week number 2 and the 72-10 win over Grambling, as well as look ahead now, to Mississippi State coming up in Starkville, 11 a.m. Before we go to break, Gordy, we talk about the deep running back room and who will emerge out of that. We've talked already about the receivers. They've got a steady rotation of receivers. But in a game like Grambling, we got to see some of the young and new tight ends that were added to the mix. Obviously, Mason Taylor suffered an injury. It doesn't appear to be all that bad. We'll probably get an update from Coach. But we got to see some guys in that tight end room to come out and play, and as you said, get those real game minutes.
No, definitely get to see Pimpton. And we've heard so much about Pimpton through fall camp, more a receiving tight end. They've got numbers. And going back to Chris, the running game and the history of these two coaches, Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly, they want to get physical. Certainly in the second half, they want to run what we call 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends. That means you need to have tight ends to do so. They do have some. They're young and they haven't played a whole lot of football, but I think you're gradually going to see him work them in, especially in the second half as they want to take over the momentum of the football game.
LSU now 1-1 on the season. As we mentioned, SEC play starts this Saturday in Starkville. We'll talk about Mississippi State, get Gordy's scout on the Bulldogs before we lead you to Coach Brian Kelly coming up at high noon. We'll return. It's the Brian Kelly press conference presented by Capital One.
Swinging at Golf Suites, your #1 destination for golf, food, and fun. Whether you are looking to enhance your game using state-of-the-art TrackMan technology or simply want to relax and enjoy an ice-cold beverage and delicious meal on our 6,000 square foot deck at Golf Suites, we guarantee a good time and even better company. And there's more. Whether it's a corporate outing, a birthday bash, or any group event, Golf Suites is your go-to venue for both small and large gatherings. Golf Suites. It's time to find your sweet spot.
Albertsons is making shopping and saving easier than ever. Check out Albertsons For You in our mobile app, where you can shop for groceries and save weekly with digital coupons all in one place. With Albertsons For You, you can earn rewards points every time you shop and redeem them for free groceries. Brand new Albertsons For You members receive $5 off their next $25 purchase just for signing up. Download the Albertsons app or go to albertsons.com to sign up. Albertsons, fresh food, local flavors.
If SEC football runs deep in your veins, then Sirius XM SEC Radio is what you need to listen to. We're talking conference and team previews, plus hear live games, news, and analysis from experts like Chris Doering, Aaron Murray, and Max Starks. Go in-depth with your favorite team with coaches shows, championship specials, and more. Get inside SEC football like nowhere else. Feed your fandom on the Sirius XM app. Stay up to date anywhere you go. Just download the app and start streaming.
Tiger fans, this is Eddie Kennison, former LSU football wide receiver. If you know me, you know I'm all about making big plays.
Tigers win! Tigers win!
That's why I joined the team at LSU Sports Properties. Our goal here is to help businesses make big plays both on and off the field. If you want to give your brand that competitive edge and be a part of the biggest stage in college sports, give the corporate sponsorship team at LSU Athletics a call. Your brand, our fans. Utilize the power of LSU Athletics to promote your business and sponsor LSU Athletics today. Call 225-578-2788. Go Tigers.
Coach Kelly is just moments away from previewing the week for the Fighting Tigers. This is the Brian Kelly Press Conference, presented by Capital One. Once again, here are Gordy and Chris.
This coming Saturday at 11 a.m., thereabouts, probably 11:06, 11:08. TV guys will let us know. It'll be Mississippi State and LSU in Starkville. And, Gordy, we could sit here and we could talk about the difficulty it is to play at that stadium, especially in this type of game when LSU comes to town. I like the fact that we're, again, starting at 11 o'clock. I think that's an advantage for the visiting team when you go to those type of venues. But I really want to focus in the next couple of minutes before Coach Kelly comes in that this is a different Mississippi State team. They got the win. They're off to a 2-0 start, had to go to overtime to get by Arizona at home this past Saturday. They got 14 points early and then mustered just 10 points in the second half and then had to rally in overtime. And Arizona, as I understand it, stayed in the game, even overcoming 4 turnovers. But it is a run-first mentality for this Mississippi State team, even with Will Rogers at quarterback. They're going to line up, they're going to run the ball at you.
Look, Zach Arnett is the new head coach. He was the defensive coordinator that Mike Leach brought over from San Diego State. And I think being on that side of the football, he realized his defense was on the field too long. So he hired Kevin Barbay, the offensive coordinator from App State. He had led the Sun Belt a year ago and was known for his run game, and they didn't turn the football over, and that's what he's trying to get done. Even with Will Rogers returning at quarterback, they have been more of a pound and ground team. They run a lot of 11 personnel. You didn't see a whole lot of that with Mike Leach. And when you look at the statistics, against Arizona, they ran the ball 29 times. Running backs ran 29 times. Marks, who we're going to hear a lot about, had 24 touches in that game. And going into overtime, Will Rogers had attempted 15 passes, Chris. This is an air raid quarterback that had gone from throwing it 40 to 50 times to just 15. So that's what Arnett wanted. They wanted to be more physical. They wanted to run the football. They're going to play in closer games. They're not going to be in the shootouts they were under Mike Leach. So it's a whole shift in philosophy in Starkville.
Yeah, when you talk about Marks, I mean, he is the featured back, over 43 carries so far on the year. He's got about 250 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. And it reminds me, again, not the scheme triple option. They're not running that, but they are going to try to have you put men in the box because they have a secret weapon out wide. The Dietrich Griffin, he's a big time receiver, and they would love to get him open. They hit him so far on the year 9 times. He's got averaging about 13 yards per catch. So it's not as if Will doesn't have somebody to go to when they want to go there.
No, absolutely, and they're doing a lot more pre-snap check with me. This isn't the air raid offense, and if you come up and you want to allocate people in the box to stop the run game, they're gonna look for Griffin. Best description for me is kind of like Keyshawn Boutte. He's not the tallest guy. He's a little thick, but he is a tremendous athlete. And when he catches the football, he's able to make things happen afterwards. He's been their big play guy through 2 games.
Again, you look at LSU, and we go into this matchup talking about the run game being what Mississippi State wants to be. Both Florida State and certainly in the first half, Grambling had success running the football. That's got to be an emphasis. I'm sure Coach Kelly's going to address that. Coach House and company going to work on that this week because they have been susceptible to not only giving up big runs and big plays, but positive yards on every snap.
Especially being young. Look, young out there in the secondary. I think the question mark going into this game is that LSU's front 7 going to be able to handle the Mississippi State run game. They did well against Florida State in the first half, and then Florida State began to lean on this LSU defense a little bit in the second half, particularly the fourth quarter. Mississippi State's going to see this on film, and that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to win the time of possession game, run the ball with Marks, and if you come up and try and stop the run, they're going to play action and let Rogers try and beat you over the top.
Again, it will be an 11 o'clock start from Stark Vegas, and it will be LSU and Mississippi State. And, again, it's just a different type of Mississippi State team that we are going to see coming up on Saturday. And we talked about the challenges defensively. Offensively, again, have you noticed a big difference in the new rules from the NCAA? I know Coach Kelly addressed it last week, said he didn't think it was changing philosophy or changing what they do when they do it. But, again, it's going to give you less plays, theoretically.
It's going to give you less plays. And for Coach Arnett, I think this plays into his philosophy that if you run the ball and you hold time of possession, you want to go deep into the play clock, then you can really keep the ball away from your opponent. And that's what I think they want to do against LSU. They gave up last week 340 yards of passing to Arizona, but as you mentioned, they had 4 interceptions. So this Mississippi State team returns 5 of their front 6 in that defensive front. They only had 1 returner in the secondary. So the question mark on that defense coming into the season was on the back end.
Again, we've got Coach Kelly coming up in just a few moments. Matter of fact, I think he has now entered the building, so he will take to the podium coming up in a minute or 2. We also are expecting to get the start time for the next home game for the Tigers, which will be LSU and Arkansas coming up around the 12 noon hour as well. And real quickly, Gordy, Coach Kelly's going to talk about this game, but in the SEC West, we can look ahead, and it's going to be interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, let's call it what it is. The SEC has not been overly impressive thus far. And, I was real bullish on LSU getting to the SEC championship game. I still am, Chris, and some of that reason was, the SEC has a lot of question marks. They have a lot of new coordinators, a lot of new quarterbacks. It's a year of transition, and they have not showed up well on the football field.
So, again, 11 o'clock, Mississippi State at LSU. We'll get things started beginning at 9 a.m. The guy's going to have to get here early and grab an early breakfast and get things started at 9 o'clock. And then Gordy and Doug Morrow would join me from Stark Vegas, and we'll have kickoff just after 11 o'clock. Hadn't seen the time yet, but typically it's 11:06, 11:08, maybe if we're lucky, 11:02.
Little bit of a time shift. Hey, we just did get the time on Arkansas. So Arkansas at home next week in Tiger Stadium will be 6 o'clock at night. So we will not have back-to-back 11 a.m. games. So Tiger fans all sigh of relief.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I was talking to the Arkansas radio crew back in the summer, and they were like, it's just weird thinking Arkansas and LSU this early in the season.
Yes.
And I was thinking the very same thing. I want it to be a night game. They definitely want it to be a night game because they're not used to playing LSU in that kind of heat. But the fact that it will be a Saturday night in Death Valley for LSU and Arkansas is a good thing, I believe, Gordy, for everybody.
No, I think so. And Arkansas had a nice win over Kent State. Speak about transition. When you think about Arkansas, 2 new coordinators up there for Sam Pittman, and they had a lot of people come in and out of the transfer portal, so a lot of question marks still at Arkansas.
Well, again, we're told Coach Kelly is just moments away from taking the podium, and we will send it to the Lawton Room. As you know, maybe your first-time listener or viewer, he'll kind of make some comments on Saturday's game, his thoughts, good, bad, and different, and then move ahead to a scouting report on Mississippi State before the press assembled and media assembled here. I don't think you can say press anymore, right? I mean, it's got to be media.
It's media.
Yeah, all right.
Multimedia.
A little old school, calling it press. I don't know that does anybody use it press? But nonetheless, he will take questions and then talk to the media. And in fact, here he comes to the podium. Gordy, we'll see you in Stark Vegas on Saturday morning.
Thank you. See you.
Here's Coach Brian Kelly.
Well, today, very much like the day 22 years ago, 9/11, never goes by without me, and I'm sure all of us remembering that day. And certainly, our thoughts always go out to those that lost their lives and our first responders. So just again, it was much like a day like today. It was just a sunny day, and I was doing cards in my office, getting ready for a game, and our life changes just like that, puts it in perspective. So that coupled with the injury that we had to the Grambling student athlete Jaquavius Richmond, had surgery at Our Lady of the Lakes, and it was obviously a very difficult injury, but the surgery was successful. It is going to be a long and difficult recovery, but we're very hopeful, and the prognosis is that obviously he'll be able to have full movement in his arms and legs, and clearly it's a very difficult injury, but that again we're very hopeful that he's able to have a very successful outcome. So not to be somber, but wanted to make sure that we touched upon some of those things. The game this past weekend, I think we talked about it last week. We want to play the game the right way, and playing for 4 quarters, starting fast, building momentum, and then leaving no doubt about what the outcome is, and putting away your opponent. Those are the tenets of playing 4 quarters of LSU football. We certainly didn't do that in week 1, and we wanted to make sure that was how we played the second game, regardless of who the opponent was. And we have a great deal of respect for Grambling, and we're excited about the game itself. But it really didn't matter all week from the perspective of who we were playing, rather as how we played the game. And I was pleased with the way we played the game. I was also very, very pleased with the way we handled our emotions. It got chippy out there. Our team had 2 penalties the entire game. And their discipline and their ability to maintain their pose and composure, I was very proud of them in that respect. On offense, when you score on your first 10 possessions, there's not much more you can say at any level, but great efficiency from an offensive perspective. Defensively, we had some, I would say, misassignments early on. The tackling certainly wasn't what we needed early on. We were probably a little bit too anxious. We settled down, and certainly in the second half, played the kind of defense that we expected to, and limited Grambling to 4 first downs, I think, and 61 total yards in the second half, and that kind of dominating defense is certainly what we're looking for. Now we turn our attention to SEC play, and certainly, this is what gets everybody's attention, and not only do we play Mississippi State, but we play on the road, and playing on the road in the SEC is a great challenge. Playing an SEC opponent obviously doubles that. Then you've got to deal with all of the things that go with travel, playing at 11 a.m., cowbells, all of those things. But you do it first and foremost with starting with great preparation this week, and then your performance. If you play really well, you don't have to deal with all those distractions like any other opponent. If you're not playing very well, you're going to hear the, any team's, band slogans, whatever they have. So this is really about, the challenge of playing on the road, handling the 11 a.m. start, playing a really well-coached football team. Zach Arnett's done a great job in his very short time of being a head coach. They're really well coached defensively. The scheme that they employ is the same as last year, which has a lot of moving parts out of their 3-down defense. And again, it's a difficult defense to go against. Offensively, there's some quite a different change there. Going away from the air raid offense, going to a much more traditional offense. It is one that certainly that many see in college football, but they've got some really good players. Will Rogers is probably one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the SEC. 35 straight starts. So when you have that, you've got experience at the quarterback position. It's a really good thing. He's got 11,000 career passing yards. Jaquavius Marks, an outstanding running back, and again, another guy that 2,100 yards rushing in games in 23 combined. It leads the SEC in rushing through 2 games. 2 100-yard games. I misspoke already in 2023. It's a good football team. So well coached. They've got depth with numbers on defense in terms of seniors and graduate seniors. So coming off a really good win in overtime against Arizona. So a great challenge for our football team. And again, anytime you go on the road, I think their returners are weapons. They've got 2 outstanding return men in terms of their punt returns and kickoff returns. Both of them were All-Americans last year, so we've got a challenge in special teams. We've got a challenge in facing a veteran quarterback and outstanding running back, and certainly the challenge that the defense brings in terms of its scheme, and then going on the road to Starksville and the early start and all those things that that you have to overcome. So with that, we'll open up to questions.
Brian, right up the middle. You mentioned the experience that Rodgers brings. What did you see in your secondary from either practice or the game that leads you to some confidence in them?
Well, I think this is a process for us that we're making some strides. I think we're competing, for the ball. I think in some instances it's really you have to look at play after play where we're getting some competitive breakups that we hadn't had in the past, and we're getting guys that are getting seasoned, and that's really what this is about. This is a process for some guys that haven't played a lot of college football. So we like the competitiveness. This is about leveraging the football. This is about being in the right technique, and it's like I said, we like our guys, but this is going to be coaching and player development the entire season.
Hey, Coach, Will Rogers only threw the ball 17 times last week. So what's new about defending him, and what's the same, I guess?
Well, his efficiency was high. It was 13 for 17. So, they're going to put him in really good positions to throw the football. He's an accurate thrower of the football. They want to run the football, and that's the change relative to their offensive structure. But they were explosive when they threw it, and the design now is such that they're going to play to their defense and set up the run through play action pass, take shots down the field, and I think it's going to really suit him. He's extremely accurate. He takes care of the football. He's really smart. So in the game that they played, it really allowed them to pick their spots in terms of when they needed to throw the football.
Brian in the middle. You mentioned in your open a couple times having to deal with playing at 11 a.m. A couple of games last year at 11 a.m. weren't great. Are you going to do anything differently, or how do you approach what you did last year for the early kick?
Well, not that we would do anything differently, but we do things in our preparation that matches an early start. For example, in our practice schedule, we'll do some things that accelerate, our team articulation. In other words, we're not going to go individual and work our way into group and then get to team. We'll go to team right away. You got to turn it on immediately. We'll do some things relative to getting our senses awakened earlier on game day. We're going to start with our team meal at around 7:20 in the morning. We're going to have an hour bus ride. So, we'll have to handle all of those things a little bit differently than a normal routine. We have a shakeout during a night game, so this is going to be a totally different schedule than that they've been presented with. So we'll use some of the things we did last year, and I think that sets them up for a little bit more of an understanding of what that day is going to look like.
Coach, kind of piggybacking on what Mike asked, did you think in fall camp that it would be this challenging back there in the secondary this early in the season?
Yes. Yeah, we knew that we were playing new players back there, and the challenges were going to be in developing players with very little experience, but with talent. But talent is only one part of the equation. It's developing, the consistency and doing the little things that require playing at a high level, tackling, leveraging the football, being in the right leverage, whether it's inside leverage or outside leverage, raking through the basket, when the ball's in the air and getting it out, and which we've done, much better in week 2. So I think all of those things were going to be work in progress for us. We competed well for the ball in the air. I think what we'd like to see better is our technique to improve, the fundamentals, and probably the tackling.
Hey, Coach, I'm curious with Mac Markway, what did he do to not play football those final couple years of high school as he rehabbed and he was injured to put himself in a position to where he's playing a lot as a true freshman, and kind of how do you think he's looked for a couple weeks?
I think, that was a personal decision that he made and his family made relative to not playing his senior year. I think he felt like he was in a really good position in understanding the nuances of what he was going to do in high school. As you know, he's a mid-year enrollee, so he got the spring football, which helped him quite a bit in understanding the offense and coming in and playing football. I think not playing again when it came to his situation had a lot to do with, the 2 knee injuries more so than anything else. And I think he was in a pretty good position in terms of the knowledge base of the tight end position. So when he came in, this was much more about learning our system. I think he did a pretty good job of picking it up, and I think he's accelerated because he had that, background and getting the spring. He's done a pretty good job. I mean, I think, the things that he's improved in is this summer, his movement skills in space. He's a lot smoother. As you know, he's a big kid that can block in line, and he's done a nice job in terms of consistency blocking in line. And now it's refining his skills in space and catching the football.
Hey, Coach, if we could maybe just get an injury update from you, and then also you mentioned just talking about Zalance Hurd and just wanting to go back and evaluate that tape. What did you make of his debut, and is that something you guys are going to lean into going forward?
Yeah, we have 2 probables. We have probable is Mason Taylor, and probable is Omar Spates. We liked his presence in the lineup. He was assignment correct. He was physical at the point of contact, and we felt like, by and large, for a first time in a collegiate, football game, he handled the emotions of the game very well. So I think we're on track to kind of similarly do what we did in the last game with him in the next game as well. Miles will still start at guard, but there's going to be a rotation there.
Ryan, you said post-game that Harold Perkins has a new position. What are y'all going to start asking him to do that's maybe different from the first game, and what was the impetus for that change?
Well, we wanted to free him up a little bit. He's got a lot of responsibilities playing inside, and we just needed to let him go and let him play fast. We felt like, with all of the things that we had asked him to do, we probably slowed him down a little bit. And one of the things that we have to do as coaches is know where your players are relative to, playing fast. And I think we saw in the very first play with the physicality he showed when the ball got out on the perimeter. That's not something that you want to do, is throw the ball out on the perimeter with Harold. So I think we made the right decision there, and now we'll refine what we do with him. Like, we can move him around, we can move him inside and outside, and do some things that can keep him in a position to impact the game. And that's what we're trying to do.
Just your assessment of the run game, and specifically getting into Caleb a little bit, does that position allow a freshman to maybe have an impact quicker than maybe a different position? And what do you see in him and his usage going forward?
Well, I think with both backs, it was a physicality. There was runs after contact. There was, that physical presence that we were looking for. But, obviously, look, no disrespect to our opponent, but it was not an SEC opponent. And so we were able to control the line of scrimmage and do it with regularity. So I think we'd be standing here with a whole different feeling if we weren't able to control the line of scrimmage. So I think we just, we were more diversified in our running game. As you saw, we ran, probably 4 or 5 different schemes up front. But the goal here was to get off the ball, and that's what we did. We got off the ball, we ran hard, we featured 2 new backs that we hadn't seen, and we liked the results. Now let's move forward with that.
Brian, I also have a running back question. Given how well he did in his debut, and the fact that you have John Emery coming back to add to the mix this week, are you looking for a back to be that predominant guy, like maybe Logan could be, or do you want to continue to be a big mix of players there?
I think what you've seen is that, we're going to feature a guy that's feeling it and is hot, if you will, but we have enough depth that we can spell a guy, and I think that's a good thing. And Mississippi State ran 5 backs on Saturday. They still have a featured back, but they were still able to get 4 or 5 deep in the running back situation. And I still think that we're in the position to find out who that featured player is. But I still think we can play multiple backs and still have the kind of continuity at the position that's necessary.
Coach, with this being the start of SEC play, is this kind of not a reset button, but to see how much you've improved in the last 2 weeks since the Florida State game moving forward?
Oh, yeah. No, there's no doubt. Look, we made a great deal of improvement in just the way we think. And that, to me, was the most important thing, thinking the right way about how to play for 4 quarters. Now we got to take that against an SEC opponent in terms of the technical, the tactical, all of those things now are going to be on display. When you miss a tackle in space, it's probably going to go for a touchdown, not a 35-yard run. So that's the next challenge for us as we go into SEC play.
Hey, Coach, right in the middle. So Mississippi State has one of the top rushing attacks in the SEC, led by Jaquavius Marks. What were you guys? How were you guys prepared for their rushing attack defensively?
Well, we know what we're getting, right? I mean, this is a lot. This is a lot different than what we've seen in the past. This is clearly something that we'll be able to prep for and prepare for during the week. But Will Rogers is an outstanding quarterback as well. He's not going to, hand the ball off if there's 9 guys on the line of scrimmage. He's very capable quarterback. So you got to be defeating blocks at the line of scrimmage. We've got to have some gap integrity, and we got to play similar to the way we played in the second half.
Yeah, Brian, could you talk about your history with Logan? I mean, how did you get him out of New Orleans when you were at Notre Dame? What was the attraction when you found out about him?
Yeah, so we were looking for somebody that could change the dynamics of our running back room, and we liked we just liked the way he played the game. He was somebody that had an edge to him. He was a guy that was featured in the passing game. As a running back, it was pretty evident that he had the skills necessary to play at the highest level. And he was a really good student, and those things were prerequisites in terms of the recruiting process. And then there was a connection there relative to former players that from that area that did well at Notre Dame. So, that was a good hook, if you will, to start, and then it was just a matter of convincing him to leave Louisiana, which was not very easy at all. I think it was probably my incredible personality. All right, it's a joke. It's going to be front page of every newspaper, and you just can't do it around here anymore. But no, I mean, it was. I think it was a combination of the ability to come in and play right away, because we didn't have a lot of depth at the position, and then the academics. I think he was looking for both, and I think that was probably the motivating factor.
Coach, over here on your right. From your perspective, what did Mason Smith look like on Saturday night? How do you look? How do you feel?
He was excited to play, and he played hard. But you can imagine, there was a little bit of rust, having not played in over a year. And I'm sure he's anxious to get back out there this weekend.
Brian, just purely on field, what did you kind of evaluate with Denver going back over the film there, and where do you what next steps as a corner do you want to see him start to take?
Yeah, I liked his demeanor. He didn't lose his cool in some instances where, he got his helmet pulled off a couple of times. He was being held. I think he's growing, and as the question was posed earlier, these young men are in a process of growing and learning, and he's learning our coverages. He's learning, he's a press corner, and we don't just play press. We play press, and we play bail, and we play off, and then we play press to off. And so there's a lot of different things that he's learning. He was just strictly a press corner. And he just pressed you, and when you came off the bus, he pressed you. And this is new to him, but he's learning, and he wants to get better at it every day. So, listen, I'm a coach. I want a captive audience. I want guys that want to be coached. And the great part about it is he wants to be coached.
Brian, I'm just curious your thoughts on the division. It's kind of had a rough weekend, and what you see in the SEC West with Alabama losing, Texas A&M losing, and what opportunities that might mean for your team. Yeah, look, every year is a different year. We could be talking in 4 or 5 weeks about, the SEC is, having such a great – it's a new cycle, It was one weekend. But I will tell you, each and every week, the SEC is going to put out great football teams. And, yeah, maybe it didn't have the banner weekend in terms of the big matchups, but ask anybody if they want to play an SEC team. I'll bet they'd rather try to play somebody else. Good? Thank you.
Coach Brian Kelly with this week's press conference leading up to the Mississippi State matchup with LSU in Starkville just after 11 a.m. coming up on Saturday. Well, as you heard, a little injury update there. Mason Taylor probable going into the game. Omar Spates probable as well. Also relayed some of the info in regards to players on the field and their first time as LSU Tigers this past Saturday in the 72-10 win over Grambling. Also, news of note, just prior to Coach Kelly taking the podium, it was announced by the league office that LSU and Arkansas, the next LSU home game, will take place with kickoff just after 6 o'clock here in Baton Rouge. We'll be back to wrap it up on the Brian Kelly press conference presented by Capital One.
It's time to score big with healthcare decisions this enrollment period. With a Medicare Advantage plan from People's Health, you get more benefits than original Medicare for no monthly premium. Benefits like $0 copays for primary care and virtual doctor visits. Part D prescription drug coverage including $0 Tier 1 and Tier 2 generic drugs. A quarterly allowance for over-the-counter items. Plus coverage for hearing aids, dental services, and glasses or contacts. Call People's Health to learn more. 1-855-633-4207.
NIL is dominating the college sports scene, and LSU has positioned itself at the front of the pack. But to remain competitive and stay ahead of the rest, we need your support. Bayou Traditions is the official NIL collective of LSU Athletics. Join the tradition and become a member by signing up online at BayouTraditionsCollective.com. Members receive exclusive access to LSU student athletes that you can't get anywhere else. Help ensure LSU remains a leader in the NIL arena. Sign up today at BayouTraditionsCollective.com.
Unrivaled content, unprecedented access. LSU Gold, powered by Bayou Traditions, is the only place for exclusive behind-the-scenes content featuring your favorite LSU teams. It's all access to the Tigers, all year long, from pregame warm-ups to postgame celebrations and every moment in between. You can watch LSU Gold anywhere, anytime, and on your favorite device. Go to lsu.gold today to sign up for your free 7-day trial, so you can be there for each step of LSU's championship journeys. That's lsu.gold.
If SEC football runs deep in your veins, then Sirius XM SEC Radio is what you need to listen to. We're talking conference and team previews, plus hear live games, news, and analysis from experts like Chris Doering, Aaron Murray, and Max Starks. Go in-depth with your favorite team with coaches shows, championship specials, and more. Get inside SEC football like nowhere else. Feed your fandom on the Sirius XM app. Stay up to date anywhere you go. Just download the app and start streaming.
This is the Brian Kelly Press Conference, presented by Capital One.
Well, that wraps up this week's press conference. Again, a reminder, coming up on Thursday, it will be the Brian Kelly Show from TJ Rips. Gets underway at 7 o'clock. Hope to see you there. Then on Saturday, we'll get it started early with LSU Game Day presented by 3 Olives. Gets the day started at 9 a.m. with former Tigers Brandon Taylor, Marlon Favorite, and your host, Hunt Palmer. And then Doug Morrow, Gordy Rush will join me from Starkville just after 11 o'clock kickoff between LSU and Mississippi State. Thank you for stopping by once again this week. Hope to join you again, same time, same channel on Monday for the Brian Kelly Press Conference presented by Capital One. Until then, so long, everybody, and go Tigers.
This has been the Brian Kelly Press Conference, presented by Capital One.